The realization hit me like a freight train on what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. I was standing in the bridal suite at the Fairmont Hotel, adjusting my wedding dress in the mirror, when I overheard my maid of honor, my supposed best friend since childhood, whispering into her phone in the bathroom. "No, trust me, this marriage won't last 6 months. Sophie's too naive and James is too selfish. I give them until Christmas tops." I froze, my hand still smoothing the silk fabric of my dress. The voice belonged to Claire Morrison, the woman who had been by my side through every major moment of my 28 years. The woman who had helped me pick out this very dress, who had thrown my engagement party, who had given a tearful speech at my rehearsal dinner about how happy she was for me. I mean, she has no idea what she's getting into. Claire continued, her voice carrying that familiar tone of superiority she used when she thought she knew better than everyone else. James told me himself he's not ready for marriage, but he felt pressured after she gave him that ultimatum last year. My blood ran cold. I had never given James an ultimatum about marriage. We had talked about our future, sure, but it had been mutual discussions, not demands. Where had Claire gotten this information? And more importantly, why was she sharing such intimate details, true or not, with whoever was on the other end of that call? "Oh, she'll figure it out eventually." Claire laughed, and the sound made my stomach turn. Sophie always does. Just takes her longer than most people. Remember how long it took her to realize Brad was cheating on her senior year? 6 months of me dropping hints before she finally caught on. I gripped the edge of the vanity, my knuckles white against the dark wood. Brad, my college boyfriend, who had shattered my heart by sleeping with half our sorority. Claire had been the one to comfort me through that breakup, had brought me ice cream and tissues, and sworn she would never let anyone hurt me like that again. But now she was talking about it like it had been some kind of entertainment for her, like watching me suffer had been amusing rather than heartbreaking. "Anyway, I should go," Claire said. "Got to play the supportive best friend for a few more hours. Talk to you later, Mom." Mom, she had been talking to her mother, gossiping about my marriage, before it had even officially begun. I heard the bathroom door handle turn, and quickly pretended to be adjusting my veil, watching Claire's reflection in the mirror as she emerged. "Sophie, you look absolutely stunning," she gushed, rushing over to fuss with my train. "James is going to lose his mind when he sees you walking down that aisle." I stared at her in the mirror, this woman with her perfectly styled blonde hair and her bright smile, who had just been predicting the failure of my marriage to her mother, like it was some kind of joke. "Claire," I said slowly, "do you really think James and I are right for each other?" She didn't hesitate for even a second. "Of course I do. You two are perfect together. I've never seen you happier than you've been with him." The ease with which she lied made my chest tight. How many other times had she said one thing to my face, while believing, or saying, something completely different behind my back? "You'd tell me if you thought I was making a mistake, right?" I pressed. "As my best friend." Claire's smile faltered, for just a moment, so briefly, I might have imagined it. Then she grabbed my hands, and looked directly into my eyes. "Sophie Chen, you are making the best decision of your life today. James loves you, you love him, and I am so honored to be standing beside you as you start this new chapter." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The wedding was starting in an hour. Our families were already seated. The flowers were arranged. The photographer was taking pictures of the groomsmen. There was no backing out now, and honestly, I didn't want to. I loved James. And despite Claire's predictions, I believed we could make our marriage work. But everything I thought I knew about my relationship with Claire had just shifted fundamentally. The ceremony went off without a hitch. James looked handsome in his black tuxedo. Our vows made half the guests cry, and Claire played her role perfectly, smiling radiantly in her dusty rose bridesmaid dress, holding my bouquet during the ring exchange, dabbing at her eyes with tissues during the kiss. At the reception, she gave a beautiful maid of honor speech about our friendship, about how proud she was of the woman I'd become, about how lucky James was to marry me. The entire room erupted in applause, and I smiled and hugged her, but all I could think about was her voice from earlier. "This marriage won't last 6 months." That night, after James and I had collapsed into bed at the hotel, exhausted but happy, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd overheard. "Did you ever tell Claire you weren't ready to get married?" I asked him as we lay in the dark. James turned to face me, confused. "What? No, why would I tell her that? I don't know, Did you ever express doubts to her about us?" "Sophie, what's going on? Where is this coming from?" I almost told him right then about what I'd overheard. But something held me back. We'd just gotten married 6 hours ago. I didn't want to start our honeymoon by creating drama with my best friend. "Nothing, I'm just tired. Wedding brain, you know." But I wasn't tired, and it wasn't wedding brain. It was the beginning of me finally seeing Claire, clearly for the first time in our 20-year friendship. The next few weeks, I found myself paying attention to things I'd never noticed before. The way Claire would make subtle digs, disguised as compliments. I love how confident you are wearing that dress. I could never pull off that style. The way she would dominate conversations when we were out with other people, often interrupting me mid-story to tell one of her own. The way she seemed to know intimate details about my relationships and friendships that I couldn't remember sharing with her. Most unsettling was how she talked about other people when they weren't around. I'd always assumed this was just normal friend gossip, but now I was hearing it differently. "Did you see Jessica's engagement photos?" she asked one afternoon as we grabbed coffee. "I mean, good for her, but that ring is not what I would have chosen. And the way she's posing, it's so desperate looking." Jessica was a mutual friend from college who had recently gotten engaged. Her photos had been sweet and romantic, and her ring, while not huge, was beautiful and obviously chosen with care. "I thought they were lovely," I said carefully. Claire shrugged. "You're always so nice, Sophie. Sometimes people need honest feedback, not just constant positivity." But it wasn't honest feedback. It was cruel judgment, disguised as truth-telling. And if this was how she talked about Jessica, how did she talk about me? That question was answered sooner than I expected. 2 months after my wedding, I was at a work conference in Chicago when I ran into Michelle Santos, a girl who had been in our friend group in high school, but had moved away for college. We grabbed drinks to catch up, and eventually the conversation turned to Claire. "I always wondered what happened between you two senior year," Michelle said, swirling her wine glass. "Between me and Claire, nothing happened. We've been best friends since middle school." Michelle looked confused. "Really? Because at graduation, Claire told everyone you guys had grown apart because you'd become really jealous and competitive with her. She said you couldn't handle that she was going to a better college and dating the quarterback." I stared at Michelle, trying to process what she was saying. Senior year, Claire and I had been closer than ever. I hadn't been jealous of her college choice. We were going to schools in different states, but we'd made plans to visit each other and stay in touch. And I'd been dating someone myself. I hadn't cared about her boyfriend. "She said you'd become really possessive and needy," Michelle continued, clearly uncomfortable now, "that you'd gotten weird about her having other friends and that she needed space from you. That never happened. I always thought it was strange because you seemed fine to me at graduation, but Claire seemed really hurt by whatever had gone down between you." I excused myself and spent the rest of the evening in my hotel room trying to piece together this new information. Claire had told people, our mutual friends, that I was jealous, possessive, and needy. She had created a narrative about our friendship that painted her as the victim and me as the problem. But why? And what else had she said about me over the years? When I got home from Chicago, I started reaching out to old friends, carefully asking about their memories of various situations. The picture that emerged was disturbing and consistent. According to multiple people, Claire had spent years subtly undermining me. She'd told our college friends that I was emotionally fragile and needed to be handled carefully. She'd suggested to co-workers at my first job that I was having trouble adjusting to the real world and might need extra support. She'd told the girls in my graduate program that I was struggling with anxiety and depression. None of these things were true, or if they contained kernels of truth, they were massive exaggerations of normal life challenges. But Claire had been presenting herself as my protector and caretaker, while simultaneously portraying me as someone who couldn't handle basic adult responsibilities. The most shocking revelation came from my friend Anna, who I'd known since college. "I always felt bad that you confided in Claire about your eating issues," Anna told me during a phone call. "It explained so much about why you were always so secretive about food when we'd go out." "What eating issues?" "The ones Claire told me about sophomore year. She said you were struggling with bulimia, but were too ashamed to get help, and that she was trying to support you through it." I felt sick. I had never had bulimia or any eating disorder. I'd always been healthy and had a normal relationship with food. But Claire had invented this lie and shared it with our friends, which explained some of the weird looks I'd gotten when we'd go out to dinner in college, and why people sometimes seemed to be watching what I ate. "Anna, I never had an eating disorder." Claire made that up. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. She made it up, but why would she? I don't know, but it's not true. It was never true. After that conversation, I started keeping a list. Every lie, every manipulation, every instance of Claire presenting a false narrative about my life to other people. The list grew longer and more disturbing with each person I talked to. She'd told people I was secretly in love with her boyfriend in high school. I wasn't. She'd claimed I'd cheated on a test in college, and she'd helped me cover it up. I hadn't. She'd suggested to mutual friends that I was having marriage problems just months after my wedding. We weren't. But perhaps the most insidious thing she'd done was position herself as the expert on Sophie Chen. She was the one people came to when they wanted to know how I was doing, what I was thinking, whether I was okay. She had made herself the gatekeeper to my own life, and she'd been giving people false information for over a decade. The realization that my best friend had been systematically sabotaging my reputation for years was devastating. But what made it worse was understanding why she'd done it. Claire needed to be the center of attention. She needed to be important, needed, admired. By portraying me as damaged and fragile, she got to be the long-suffering best friend, the loyal companion who stuck by me despite my problems. She got sympathy and praise for her devotion, and she got to feel superior. I was her pet project, her charity case, her proof of what a good person she was. But I'd never been any of those things. I'd been a normal person with normal struggles, and Claire had turned my ordinary life into a soap opera, with herself as the star. The confrontation happened 3 months after my revelation. I'd been planning what to say, how to approach it, whether to even bother. Part of me wanted to just fade out of the friendship quietly, but Claire had been telling lies about me for years, and those lies had affected my relationships with other people. I deserved the chance to defend myself. I asked her to meet me for lunch at our usual spot, a little cafe downtown where we'd had hundreds of conversations over the years. She arrived in a great mood, full of gossip about her co-workers, and excited to tell me about a guy she'd met on a dating app. So, anyway, she said, halfway through her salad, how are things with you and James? You seemed a little tense at dinner last week. James and I hadn't been tense at all. We'd been tired because we'd both worked long hours that week, but we'd had a perfectly pleasant evening. But this was typical Claire, finding problems that didn't exist so she could position herself as the concerned friend who noticed everything. Actually, Claire, I wanted to talk to you about something else. She put down her fork, immediately alert. Claire had always been good at reading people, which was probably part of what made her so skilled at manipulation. I've been doing some thinking about our friendship, I continued. Specifically, about some conversations you've had with other people about me over the years. Her face went carefully blank. What do you mean? I mean the stories you've told people. About my supposed eating disorder. About me being jealous and possessive. About my marriage problems. About me being emotionally fragile and needy. Claire's mouth opened slightly, but she didn't deny anything immediately, which told me everything I needed to know. Sophie, I think there might be some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. I've talked to multiple people, Claire. I know what you've said. We stared at each other across the table. The cafe buzzed with lunch conversation around us, but our corner felt isolated and tense. I was trying to help, she said finally. You don't always see how you come across to people, and I thought if I could explain things, they'd understand you better. By making up lies about me having mental health issues and eating disorders. They weren't lies. They were interpretations. You do struggle with anxiety sometimes, and you have been weird about food. Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. I don't struggle with anxiety any more than any normal person. And I've never been weird about food. You made those things up, Claire, and even if they were true, they weren't your stories to tell. She was quiet for a long moment, picking at her napkin. You don't understand what it's like, she said eventually. Being your friend, I mean. You act like everything is so easy for you. Like you just float through life without any real problems. Do you know how exhausting it is to be around someone who never seems to struggle with anything? I stared at her, genuinely confused. What are you talking about? I've struggled with plenty of things. I've talked to you about my problems for years. Surface problems, job stress, boy drama, family stuff, but never anything real. Never anything that actually matters. Those things do matter. They matter to me. See, this is what I mean. You think a bad day at work is a crisis. You've never had to deal with anything truly difficult. The irony was staggering. Claire was criticizing me for not having enough problems while simultaneously inventing problems to tell other people about. So you decided to fix that by making up trauma for me. I didn't make anything up. I just helped people understand that you're not as perfect as you seem. I never claimed to be perfect, Claire. I've always been honest about my flaws and mistakes. Have you? Or do you just share the cute, relatable ones that make people like you more? I realized then that this conversation was pointless. Claire genuinely believed that I had been performing my entire personality for our entire friendship. She thought my kindness was fake. My struggles were shallow, and my successes were undeserved. More than that, she resented me for having a life she perceived as easier than hers, and she'd spent years trying to level the playing field by damaging my reputation. I think, I said carefully, we need to take a break from this friendship. Claire's eyes filled with tears immediately. Sophie, no. You're overreacting. Every friendship has bumps, and we can work through this. I love you. You're my best friend. You. Don't treat people you love the way you've treated me. I made some mistakes. Okay. I was trying to help. And maybe I went about it wrong. But my heart was in the right place. Your heart was not in the right place, Claire. You've been sabotaging me for years while pretending to be my biggest supporter. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern. I stood up and pulled out my wallet, but Claire grabbed my wrist. Please don't do this. I need you, Sophie. You're the most important person in my life. And there it was. The truth she'd probably never admitted, even to herself. She needed me, but not as a friend. She needed me as someone to feel superior to. Someone to rescue. Someone whose life she could control and manipulate. I was important to you, I said gently, but not in the way that mattered. I left money for my lunch and walked out of the cafe. Claire didn't follow me. That was 4 years ago. I haven't spoken to Claire since that day, and I don't regret it. The hardest part wasn't losing her. It was realizing how much of my adulthood life had been shaped by her manipulations. For years, I'd wondered why I felt insecure in social situations. Why I sometimes felt like people were talking about me behind my back. Why certain friendships felt strained, for reasons I couldn't understand. It was because Claire had been planting seeds of doubt about my character and mental health wherever she went. I spent months reaching out to people, explaining the truth about various situations, correcting the record where I could. Some people were horrified to learn they'd been lied to. Others seemed to have figured out on their own that Claire wasn't entirely trustworthy. A few had always taken her stories with a grain of salt, but the damage was done. Some relationships couldn't be repaired because too much time had passed, or because people weren't sure what to believe anymore. The silver lining was that removing Claire from my life was like taking off a pair of shoes that had been too tight. For 20 years, suddenly I could breathe. I stopped second-guessing myself constantly, stopped worrying about whether I was being too much or not enough. I started trusting my own perceptions instead of defaulting to Claire's interpretations of every situation. My marriage, which according to Claire should have ended months after it began, grew stronger without her constant negativity and manufactured drama. James and I celebrated our 4th anniversary last month, and we're happier than ever. I made new friends, real friends who liked me for who I actually was, not who they thought I was, based on Claire's stories. I reconnected with old friends who were relieved to learn that I wasn't actually the fragile, dramatic person Claire had painted me as. Most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts about people. The red flags had been there with Claire. The subtle put-downs, the need to be the center of attention, the way she collected secrets and shared them inappropriately. But I'd ignored them because we had history, because she was my best friend, because I thought loyalty meant overlooking someone's flaws. Now I know the difference between supporting a friend through their imperfections and enabling someone who is actively working against your best interests. Last month, I ran into Claire at a mutual friend's wedding. She looked the same, perfectly styled, bright smile, charming everyone around her. When she saw me, her face lit up like we were long-lost sisters. Sophie, oh my God, it's been forever. You look amazing. She air-kissed me, like nothing had happened, like we just lost touch naturally over the years. How have you been? I've missed you so much. We should grab coffee soon and catch up properly. I smiled politely and made small talk for a few minutes, but kept the conversation surface level. When she pressed for my phone number, I deflected. When she suggested we reconnect on social media, I changed the subject. I watched her work the room throughout the night, and I recognized the patterns I'd once been blind to. The way she inserted herself into every conversation, the subtle ways she put other people down while seeming to build them up, the way she collected information about everyone like currency she could spend later. At one point, I overheard her talking to the bride's sister about another wedding guest. Did you see how much weight Kelly has gained? I'm worried about her, honestly. She's been having a really hard time since her divorce, and I think she's stress eating. Someone should probably talk to her about it. Kelly looked perfectly fine to me. Happy, healthy, enjoying herself at the wedding. But there was Claire, manufacturing concern and drama, where none existed, positioning herself as the caring friend who noticed everything. I felt a wave of sadness, not for myself, but for Claire. This was still who she was, still what she needed, to feel important, She hadn't learned anything from losing our friendship, hadn't grown or changed or developed the capacity for genuine connection. She was still the same person who needed other people to be smaller so she could feel bigger. When people ask me when I realized my best friend was actually my worst enemy, I tell them it wasn't a single moment of discovery. It was a slow awakening to patterns I'd been ignoring for years. The phone call I overheard on my wedding day was just the beginning. The real realization came over months of investigation, of connecting dots I'd refused to see, of accepting that someone I loved had been working against me for our entire friendship. Claire wasn't evil, exactly. She wasn't sitting in her apartment, plotting my downfall. She was just deeply insecure, and had found a way to manage that insecurity by diminishing the people closest to her. I happened to be her primary target, but I doubt I was her only one. The hardest part was accepting that our entire friendship had been built on a foundation of her need to feel superior, and my need to believe the best in people. She got to be the wise, patient friend, dealing with my supposed issues, and I got to feel like someone cared about me, enough to stick around despite my flaws. Except the flaws were mostly fictional, and the care was conditional on my willingness to be less than I actually was. Now when I meet new people or deepen existing friendships, I pay attention to how they talk about others when they're not around. I notice whether they need to be the expert on everyone else's life. I watch for signs that someone needs me to be smaller so they can feel bigger, and when I see those red flags, I listen to them. The most valuable lesson Claire taught me was completely unintentional. Not everyone who claims to love you actually has your best interests at heart. Some people love the idea of you, or the role you play in their life, or the way you make them feel about themselves. But real love, in friendship or romance, wants you to be your fullest, most authentic self. It doesn't need to diminish you to feel secure. It doesn't create problems where none exist. It doesn't turn your private struggles into public entertainment. Real love celebrates your successes without feeling threatened. It supports you through actual difficulties without exaggerating them. It protects your reputation instead of slowly destroying it. I have that kind of love now, from James, from my newer friends, from family members who've always seen me clearly. And I'm grateful every day that I finally learned to recognize the difference between love and its cheap imitation. Claire did me one enormous favor. She taught me exactly what I won't tolerate in my relationships anymore. For that lesson, as painful as it was to learn, I'm actually thankful. I just wish it hadn't taken me 20 years to figure it out.